Hi, everyone. We're so happy that you're at our presentation today. Welcome to Fumbling Towards Radical Information Liberation with the Prison Library Support Network. This is a repeat of our talk that was presented at the Urban Librarians Conference in May. We're so excited to be able to present again today through Metro to those who were not able to make the conference. Our goal for this presentation is to offer the Prison Library Support Network, PLSN, as a model for organizing sustainable, volunteer-powered information networks and collectives outside of institutions. We hope, if nothing else, this acts as an argument for the value of work that demands collective reflection on what our roles as information workers might look like in the struggle for collective liberation. We'll introduce ourselves in more detail in just a moment, but just to give you an idea of the rundown for this afternoon, after introducing ourselves, Mia will discuss how and why PLSN started and our approach to organizing, aka how we build our relationships. Mary will then talk about the projects we've done, from the asks that inspire them to the way we work through them as a non-hierarchical organization, to the feedback we've received from library workers and incarcerated people we work in solidarity with. Emma will then finish us off and discuss what brought us to and keeps us tied to this work, how it brings joy and how it fosters radical information liberation. We've also collected resources for anyone interested in doing similar work. So before we each introduce ourselves, we feel strongly about the importance of naming power and privilege in this room. We want to acknowledge that the four of us speaking on behalf of PLSN are white-passing, cisgendered women who work in non-managerial library roles in New York City. Though we've borne witness to the effects of the prison industrial complex on friends and family, we have not experienced incarceration ourselves, and we do not wish to speak from the vantage point of trans, GNC people, Black, Brown, Asian, Indigenous people, or anyone else who has been more directly targeted by the carceral system than us. Rather, from our privileged position inside the world of library and information science, we present our work as just one attempt to organize within our own communities and to illustrate the role libraries might play in information liberation and prison abolition. My name is Manuela. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a middle school educator with interest in expanding inclusivity and cultural competency in the school library environment, as well as organizing and volunteer work around literacy and access to information for everyone. I became a PLSN organizer in 2018 when I started as a library student at Pratt. Through my work with PLSN, which primarily involves managing communication, keeping us on track with ongoing tasks, and co-organizing projects such as our book club, I've loved meeting people that felt similarly about using our resources as information professionals to support incarcerated people.
My name is Mia. My pronouns are she, her. By day, I'm an academic librarian at Sarah Lawrence College, and by night, I organize PLSN along with so many people. I'm one of the founding members of PLSN, and I've played a major role in dreaming up a lot of our projects, which I'm really proud of. My passion is exploring the radical potential of reference and the capacity of information liberation to support movements for prison abolition. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm really excited to get to do this presentation again.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Karn Erickson. My pronouns are she, hers. I am currently a young adult librarian for a public library. I have been with PLSN since like 2017, 2018, not exactly sure when I started. I would say I'm currently the content creator and manager for our Instagram. I'm usually the main facilitator for most of our meetings, and I lend my brain to different projects whenever it has the bandwidth. Outside of libraries and PLSN, I make zines and host zine making workshops when we are allowed to be in person. To learn more about that and other stuff about me, if you're interested, you can check out my website, which I threw together to give the appearance of being professional.
My name is Mary Mann. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the archives librarian at the Cooper Union, which is down in downtown Manhattan. I'm passionate about history and research and investigating history in order to better occupy our present moment. I've been involved in PLSN since, I think, 2018, I think the same time as Manuela. And I do kind of a little bit of whatever there is to be done, and I really love it. And I'm glad you guys are here to watch us love it, I guess.
So now that we've introduced ourselves, I'm going to talk a little bit about how and why PLSN started, as well as our approach to organizing, or how we build our relationships. As a way of framing that, I thought we could take a minute to just define these two concepts you see on the screen that are our guiding light, per se, in terms of how we approach our work. When we use the term information liberation, what we're talking about is employing information in a way that simultaneously severs its connections to oppressive social forces and makes it a resource in the struggle for liberation. By prison abolition, we mean a political vision with the goal of eliminating imprisonment, policing, and surveillance, and creating lasting alternatives to punishment and imprisonment. Of course, these are not ideas or concepts that we made up. They're based on the work of abolitionist leaders and people whose work we use as a resource, such as Angela Davis, Mariam Kaba, Mitchell Mora, Ozzie Graham, and Nina De Jesus. And next, I present you with the PLSN mission statement. The Prison Library Support Network, PLSN, is an information-based collective founded in 2016 to support incarcerated people by organizing networks for sharing resources and building community around prison abolition in libraries, archives, and other information-based institutions. Since our inception, we've developed a series of projects in partnership with New York City Area Library Correctional Services that seek to share information resources without growing the reach of the carceral state. Much of our organizing is driven by the following question: how can we use our skills and resources related to information to support incarcerated people in a material way and create spaces for abolition? We believe as information workers, we're uniquely positioned to think outside the box or outside the scope of institutions. We aim to build upon systems of access to information about, for, and by us, working toward an attainable vision of collective information resources that support liberation and abolition through access. This concept draws on ideas laid out in a piece called Libraries, Prisons, and Abolition that is linked to in our resources slide. And now I'm going to turn it over to the wonderful Mia, who will talk about how and why we all got started in our organizing work with PLSN. Thank you.
My name is Mia. I was am one of the founding members of PLSN. So I'm going to talk about how we started. So PLSN really started as a result of a lot of organizing that was going on amongst librarians after Donald Trump was elected in 2016. So librarians all across the city began to gather to talk about how we could work together to respond to oppressive state violence in like a tangible way. And one subgroup that emerged was like a motley crew of school librarians, academic librarians, graduate students, organizers, public librarians, archivists, and like some museum people who really wanted to establish a project that supported incarcerated people by addressing their material needs as best as possible while also being guided by like radical values and principles. So this slide shows what some of like our kind of founding principles and values were and continue to be, and I'm going to talk through them. So first, abolition, which Manuela just defined, so I'll spare you the repetition. Next, information-based. So PLSN has always consisted of people who are library workers in many capacities, but also people who aren't trained in library and information science. Like sometimes we've had people who are professional researchers or who are PhD students or are people who are just in our community who can definitely do the work of getting a particular book donation and who we have strong relationships with. So rather than define like our membership based on having a particular kind of professional qualification, we define our work as information-based. We focus on work that creatively and strategically shares information and information-related resources. So part of doing our work responsibly also means focusing on developing workflows and like praxis for sharing information that live up to our values as abolitionists and also as people who are like invested in sharing information in a quick and responsible way. PLSN strives to be anti-institutional. We aren't a nonprofit. We have never had a budget, though we have definitely all kind of like relied on different kinds of institutional access and resources that we have. Emma is going to talk in a lot more depth later about why and how like our work is shaped by our belief and commitment to being anti-institutional. But what I'll say about it now is like, this is important because we believe we're free to do our best work when we're working independent of an institution. This independence allows us to be explicit about our values. It allows us to be creative and flexible based on incarcerated people's stated needs. Our last like founding value is no cops, no savior. So rather than deciding what's best for people, we believe that people know best what they need. Our work is defined by respecting the authority of incarcerated people as library users to define their own needs. We don't police them or impose judgments about safety. We approach all of our projects with the goal of responding quickly, efficiently, and with care. But we offer information in the best way possible for people to do what they feel is in their best interest. Before Mary takes it away and talks about some of our projects in concrete ways, I wanted to talk about relationship building because it is a foundational part of our organizing philosophy. So this side features all of the organizations we've connected with and worked with in some way. While some abolitionist efforts and organizing efforts focus in really powerful ways on institutional changes, our organizing focuses on building relationships and trust between incarcerated people and library workers who are committed to this kind of work. As people with extreme privilege, we don't believe it's our place to be acting as authorities in defining the goals of abolition. However, we feel like we can focus on building what Angela Davis calls a constellation of alternative resources that we can use to support people who lack our connections and who are more violently targeted by police and the criminal justice system. Something I can't stress enough is the importance of building relationships in achieving all this. It allows you to develop knowledge about how to struggle together, which can get really personal and a lot of times can require trust. So to get started, at least for us with PLSN, it didn't require funding. It didn't require being a nonprofit or necessarily an institutional affiliation. It really required defining our values, goals, and starting to share them everywhere we could. So to give you a narrative example of what I'm talking about, here is how I worked on starting our first reference project. So I had been working as the library assistant at Pratt, and part of that was I got tuition remission and I got to get my degree there. So I took a class on providing reference, and the professor had partnered with NYPL's Correctional Services Division and had us volunteering as part of learning to do reference to answer reference letters from incarcerated people that were sent to NYPL. After the class, I noticed that a lot of my peers wanted to continue, but the library staff at the public library at NYPL specifically didn't have the capacity to coordinate volunteers because they're focused, rightly so, on incarcerated people. That is their job. And this seemed like something that I could address through PLSN. So I got in touch with the professor who connected me with NYPL, and they didn't have the ability to work with us immediately. Our relationship with them would be built later, which Mary is going to talk about in just a second. But because I was kind of going around Pratt and going around my workspace and talking about how I was interested in this type of work, during one of my desk shifts, somebody came to check out books and connected me with someone who knew somebody who was the head of Brooklyn Public Library's jail and prison library services. And he happened to really need volunteers to help them answer reference letters, which was the beginning of our first reference effort. So it turned out that I didn't need funding. I really just needed to reach out to the people around me and clearly define what I could offer and adjust it until it connected and corresponded with a need. That is enough for me. I'm going to pass it off to Mary, who's going to show you in a bit more practical terms what I'm talking about.
Thanks, Mia. Hi, everybody. So Mia just told you a little bit about what PLSN is and how we came to be. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do. All of the projects I'm about to talk about have emerged from the same process. We learn about a problem that prison libraries are experiencing. We see what resources that we have. We propose a way to support, and we implement that. So the first project I'm going to talk to you about is reference letter answering. Now, Mia told you how we got started answering reference letters, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about how that evolved and where we are right now. First off, I should let you know, in case you don't already, that correspondence is really important in prisons. Most incarcerated people don't have access to the internet, and there's a huge void of information that makes time in prison more painful and the transition after prison more difficult. So people write letters to libraries asking questions about everything from how to start a food truck business or a laundromat to, the attributes of a famous comic book character that they've been missing. But the problem that prison libraries had was how to answer all these sometimes very time-consuming questions. So we stepped in to support, first by hosting letter answering sessions on behalf of Brooklyn Public Library, training our volunteers using resources from Pratt and from NYPL's Correctional Services Division. And eventually this morphed into a service that we called Virtual Reference. One of the correctional services librarians at Queens Public Library told us that she'd been getting verbal questions while doing book cart service on Rikers. And a guy at Brooklyn Public said, yeah, I'm getting the same thing happening to me. So we created a system where they would just type these questions in, and that pinged the PLSN email. We'd then contact our volunteers to see who had the skill and the bandwidth to submit an answer. They would send it in, and the librarians would print it out and bring in the physical answer next time they came in. We reimagined reference when we needed to. And now we're in the process of reimagining this project yet again, because book cart service was suspended when COVID hit, and there's no indication yet of when it's coming back. To be useful, we really have to be flexible and evolve our support along with the needs of our partners. So the way that New York Public Library Correctional Services works, it didn't really make sense for us to help them answer reference letters. But they had another problem that we were able to support, a lack of really good readable books. Correctional services don't typically have book budgets in the way that a circulating library does. Some of our partners have had years where they were given $0 for buying new books. So they really, really depend on donations, and the books that they get aren't always great. There kind of seems to be an idea that people in prisons will just read anything because what else are they going to do? But incarcerated people have likes and dislikes just like the rest of us. Our support in this case manifested as book drives, which were different than what you might be familiar with because they're specifically driven by requests from incarcerated patrons. We set up a system whereby the prison librarian would just enter all the book requests they got into a spreadsheet, and then around 4 times a year, PLSN would get together a bunch of volunteers to find and email publishing houses and ask directly for book donations. We just had coffee and donuts and a good old time. People were really wonderful. In the first year alone, we got thousands of new books for Rikers. This project, unfortunately, is currently on hiatus because of COVID, which brings me to our next slide. COVID, it happened, and everything went into lockdown last March, as you guys all probably know. In-person library service in the prisons completely stopped then, and we still don't have any indication from the DOC of when it will come back. That's not all. As many of you probably already know, COVID placed an emphasis on digital services, and funds were moved around to beef up these services. But these are services that are completely inaccessible to incarcerated and even many recently released people. If you don't have access to the internet right now, you're essentially locked out of information. So clearly the prison librarians that we work with at NYPL, BPL, and QPL were faced with a lot of problems, but a lot of them could be addressed just by having more resources that they can use as they needed. They're not allowed to fundraise on their own behalf, so we stepped in to support, launching a fundraiser in the fall of 2020 that raised $12,000, which was like thousands of dollars over our original goal. We were really excited. All of this money went directly to the prison librarians at the 3 libraries that we work with to use however they saw fit. You can see in this photo a bunch of boxes of books that were purchased and delivered to a prison facility that has its own library space. So that's one purpose that money went to. Additionally, in partnership with Greenlight Books in Brooklyn, we used our old book drive spreadsheet of requests to start a wish list of books that anyone can purchase, and Greenlight sends these books directly to our partners. So as before, we reached out to publishers, but now we're reaching out to individuals like you. So if you want to support a prison library too, we can give you that link. We might give it to you right now in the chat, or maybe at the end of this slideshow. I'm not really sure, but we will. Just to illustrate the meaningfulness of these boxes of books, I'd like to read a quote from one of the librarians that we partner with. She says, "It takes their minds out of their situation, allowing them to have a decent night's sleep. I remember once going back to a facility that hadn't been open, and when we went in, everyone was so excited, almost like happy dancing, whooping for joy. One guy said, 'It's going to be quiet tonight.' The last project I want to talk to you about actually addresses a different kind of problem. The other projects that I shared with you focused on service to incarcerated library patrons. But information isn't just something that we provide as librarians, it's also something that we need. If we want to be useful as advocates and activists for the patrons that we serve, we have to be lifelong learners too. And it felt important to make this learning a community activity so that we could all start developing a shared dialogue about our relationship to mass incarceration and movements for abolition. And the solution we came to was, obviously, we're librarians, a book club. Metro kindly provided us with a conference room and their platform from which to publicize the book club. And we used a syllabus provided by an abolitionist organization called Black and Pink. If you haven't heard of them, look them up, they're wonderful. Everyone, of course, has their own individual experiences and takeaways from this book club. For me, it was a safe space to deepen my understanding of how prisons shape society and vice versa. And it helped me develop language around abolition so that I could more confidently answer any questions that my friends and family might have. Because of COVID, we no longer have access to the Metro physical space, of course, but we've partnered with Blue Stocking Bookstore, who's been hosting a virtual book club with us. Our next meeting is July 11th. We're going to continue discussing beyond survival strategies and stories from transformative justice. If you want to learn more or join in.
Hi, everyone. How's it going? Now that you have heard from all of these lovely ladies here, and you know how we started, what we've done, what we are doing, you might be wondering why. Why are we doing this work? It is real hard to speak for everyone in an organization on why they're a part of that organization, because everybody is going to come to this work for different reasons. I will say, I think it's fair to assume that everyone comes to PLSN with a desire to help an abolition in their hearts, or to learn more about abolition and how they can help. And that's really part of our strength. Everyone is coming to PLSN with very different levels of knowledge of prison abolition and organizing, some who've been doing the work for years, while others who have just heard about these concepts. We explore abolition and how libraries and information is going to fit into that conversation over and over again, each time teasing out ideas and coming to these new conclusions together. So in preparation for these slides, I asked our members to give me very short 1 to 2 sentence blurbs on why they joined PLSN and what keeps them interested in this work. And all of them gave me very lengthy paragraphs, which was really great because it gave me a lot to work with. But I noticed that these 3 things kept coming up, is that they came to find a community of peers, that they wanted to find a space to explore and implement radical ideas within library and information science, and the ability to find a way to use the skills that our very expensive degrees have, given us, that we can use that for abolition work and other radical work. So I'm going to read these quotes. So for sense of community, we have, I'm so thankful for PLSN because it has helped me start to find and build the community around abolition and libraries I've always dreamed of having in my life. Radical LIS. I entered librarianship with a lot of lofty ideals, and I wasn't able to find space to explore until I started organizing with PLSN. For using skills and resources, I love that it allows me to expand my skill sets and communities, as well as collaborate on projects and efforts I feel passionate about. And the last one, I am so glad I've become more involved in PLSN. It is super rewarding to provide any and all types of services to incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people, no matter how small. And I really love that last one because I think it hits on something key about why we do this work, and also why it's important, is that any and all things that you do, no matter how big, no matter how small, no matter how lasting or temporary, can and does make a difference. It is so easy to get bogged down with the well, what is this really going to accomplish? Is this going to change anything? But truly, the revolution starts with you, and it is ongoing. There is no known end date to this. Every day, we are going to wake up in the soup of a racist, capitalist, and carceral world, and every action that we take is going to get us a little further out of it. So, right, maybe we're not physically dismantling prison walls by answering reference letters, but we slightly alter the quality of someone's life by providing them answers to their questions. We say, we see you, your inquiries are valid, let us help you. And that's a really powerful thing to people who are isolated and have been stripped of their freedoms. I also think that PLSN functions best because we have recognized that our power lies within us and the resources that we have access to as information professionals. And like the little things that we can do with our skills in this community that we've built. Each of our members brings a different ability and lens through which we find common ground and collective ways to problem solve without overstretching ourselves, which is really important in radical social justice work to, lean on your community and not overburden or burn yourself out. So Mary has these like amazing research skills. Mia is so brilliant in building relationships and nurturing ideas. I think I'm pretty good at graphic design, which has come in helpful in a variety of ways. Manuela writes one hell of an email blast. Alicia, who's not here with us, but is a volunteer who helps us just like proofread all of the stuff that we send out, which is incredibly valuable. We also have like the random one-time volunteer who just comes and answers like 4 reference letters and we never hear from them again. Like that person is amazing too. PLSN, like all of those little bits are going to come together and they're going to just contribute to our work and make it that much stronger, that much better. And PLSN's contribution to the wider cause of abolition is that we do all of those things in our mission statement that we read to you so long ago. So like we exist where we support existing work. We help educate and bring people together to talk about abolition. We build relationships and connections between people to create those spaces where projects where we can support incarcerated folks, which of course is like our ultimate goal. And that is one of the reasons we're here, right? This presentation is part of it. We really hope, maybe you'll learn something from this. You're going to have some conversations. Maybe you're even going to say like, well, heck, this PLSN sounds real neat. And I think I have something I can contribute. And you're going to come join us at a general meeting and volunteer to do a task or a project. And then we're going to have one more person who can provide their skills and connections and their knowledge and time to supporting incarcerated people. So yeah, sorry. Fun fact, this has been just like a recruiting presentation. And we're hoping that you're all going to come follow us and volunteer for PLSN. Probably should have put a warning in the beginning. One of the things, though, I think is like some people wonder, like, why are we doing this as information workers? Like, what is the connection between information work and abolition? And I do want to reiterate that not everyone involved in PLSN is an information worker. We definitely have people from all backgrounds who come and help us, but the core members are all information workers in one way or another. So why do we do this as information workers? So all information institutions are complicit and have the ability to liberate. Libraries, archives, museums, and other information spaces have a history and a present tied to colonization, white supremacy, ableism, cis-heteronormativity. We have thrived because of these isms and have only apologized and changed under pressure. That fact is like a whole other presentation that we just do not have time for, so I can't dwell on it for too long, but I do hope that you take that fact and you let it sit with you and you let it make you uncomfortable. Take your time after the presentation to read through some of the articles we've included in our resource slide, do your own investigating and research, have those conversations with your colleagues. But to bring it back, the reason that we're bringing this up is because information institutions and spaces hold power. And if you are a library information worker, you work in those spaces, that means that you also hold power and privilege. So it may feel extreme to say that if you work in an information space and you are not actively involved in liberation, then you are passively involved in incarceration. But I'm going to say it. And I really want to make sure that everyone understands that we are not implying that if you're not literally setting fire to the prisons, that you aren't fighting the good fight, right? Remember, only a few minutes ago, I talked about how every small thing that we do can make a really big impact, right? Every step takes us in the right direction. I will also say that everyone at PLSN recognizes that there are limitations within our institutions. They are designed hierarchically to squash innovation and change. And there are too many people above us who are more concerned with the person above them and funding goals rather than doing the right and radical thing. But you can't let that stop you from trying and pushing forward. And if not in your professional life, then certainly in your personal one. So information institutions, especially libraries, are a very unique space for information liberation and abolition because as the keepers of information, we have the ability to be its liberators. So we can waive the fine. We can repatriate, right? Fancy word for return, stolen works. We can pull down paywalls. We can refuse surveillance. We can fight for patron privacy. We can request the speaker and defend their right to speak. Or alternatively, we can call out the speaker as being problematic and remove their platform. We can create a book club and inspire a discussion. We can stop hosting cop and coffee programs and instead create social service connection programs. We can start using restorative justice practices instead of just banning patrons who are too loud for our liking. We can, and we must. And to those of you who may not come with me fully on this journey, you're like, all right, I get it. Cops are bad, prisons are bad, and social justice is important to me, but I don't really see what the library has to do with it, right? So I'm gonna hopefully change your mind with yet another quote and some more analysis. Prison and police abolition are not merely about ridding society of these systems, but about the creation of different forms of sociality, governance, and accountability that are not statist and carceral. So this is Mariam Kaba quoted in Library, Prisons, and Abolition, which we do have linked in our resource guide at the end. It is long, it is worth reading. So this is like, if you want to be a part of liberation, if you want to be part of the movement, if you want to be part of going forward, like, this is what it looks like. Here's what it's going to be going forward, right? Abolition is not just about destruction. It is very much about creation. We have to build the better thing that we want to see in place of the police, in place of the carceral system, in the place of punishment. And the library and other information spaces are one piece of the very much like the larger restructuring and rebuilding puzzle, right? So every library advocacy tagline is like, libraries are part of the community. We are the community. The community needs us. The library makes a community, or libraries transform, how we uplift, we change lives, right? Very nice one-liners. But if all of that is to be believed, then we have to stand behind that to the fullest, right? We need to be champions of how we want to see our communities. We need to consider the library's role, our role in the new world that we want to see. If we want communities to be free from state violence, if we want to see our communities healthy and thriving, if we want to be part of the radical transformation of people's lives, we have to do the work, right? So does that look like library community rooms being used for accountability process? Yeah, it does. Does that look like no security guards and instead equitable and patron agreed on community guidelines and maybe peer navigators and branches? Yep, that's part of it. Does that look like putting pressure on your library chiefs, directors, and administrators to put their money where the Black Lives Matter statements are? Yes. Does that look like libraries not calling the cops on people? Yes. If you have the will, there is a way. In 2020, I saw more library organizing sprout up than I thought physically possible for one country. So many new groups, so many new acronyms, doing awesome stuff, having really deep conversations, hosting skill shares, and presenting about radical information liberation, right? There are people out there who want to do this work. And if we keep shouting, if we keep learning, if we keep listening, if we keep the pressure on, we can transform our libraries into true spaces of joy and collective liberation. So hopefully now I have you fully jazzed up and you are rip-roaring to get to work, but maybe you're not sure where to start. Don't worry, we are here to help with that. So let's talk about how to do it yourself. So maybe you have not fallen for our recruitment pitch and you don't want to join PLSN. Instead, you want to start your own thing. Maybe there's a different cause that you are really passionate about, or you want to do something more focused on whatever communities you serve. So let's talk about that. The very first thing that you have to do is to take stock of who you are, what you have and have access to. This can be as simple or as complicated as you would like it to be. You can take out a piece of paper, you can open a Word document, you can open up a phone, like a note thing on your phone, and literally list out things. You know, this could be, for example, I work in a public library, so I have access to physical space, right? Because of community rooms. I have access to a photocopier. I have access to laptops that I can, lend out to people. Maybe if you work in an academic library, you can have access to databases that are, not share, usually at other library systems. Write down things about yourself. I love public speaking, or alternatively, I hate public speaking. I am very outgoing. I have lots of connections in this part of the neighborhood, whatever it is, literally listing out all of those things. Like, you gotta start with you before moving on to the what else and what's out there. But the next part too is to see who is already doing what. There are so many groups out there. Before reinventing the wheel, see if there's someone else who's also organizing around the same thing that's very important to you, and lend your support there, right? So instead of splitting up resources, you can combine forces. Also, find your crew. The revolution is more fun with friends, and this is generally important for everybody. I love everyone in PLSN. They're some of my best friends, and it makes the work more engaging. It makes me want to keep coming back and keep hanging out with them. The next, right, determine the problem that you want to solve or support. Solve is in air quotes because it is very rare that anything will be solved by one group doing one thing. But by sort of writing out the idea of like, okay, this is maybe the problem we see, this is what we think we could do to help, gives you a little bit of a definition. And the best way to do all of that is to educate yourself. I'm assuming many of us in here are information workers, so that's part of our life now. So brush up on radical and revolutionary ideas, authors, and politics. Maybe join a cool book club. Next, get to know the community, right? Like if your problem that you want to solve is that you have a lot of homeless LGBTQIA plus youth in your neighborhood and you want to support them, go talk to them, get to know them, find out what is going on, what are their actual needs, rather than what you assume their needs are, right? Like you might think, oh, they really need this thing, and actually when you talk to them, they're like, no, this is what we really want. Because we definitely do not want to be just like, making those assumptions and doing that thing where we say, well, I know what you need, as opposed to listening to make true progress. Real quick, as we have mentioned, we do have resources at the end of this presentation, and there you're going to find some of our favorite articles, readings, and resources on getting things done. There's a whole section on how to do it yourself with really great stuff on getting started organizing. I'm just going to say very quickly, I would highly recommend, if nothing else, to check out the social change ecosystem map, which is a really good tool for individuals to find where they fit into larger movements. It's a great place to start. If you're not sure where, that is where I would start. Our goal for this presentation, right, was to offer PLSN's work as one model for organizing sustainable volunteer-powered information networks and services, and to encourage reflection on what our roles as information workers looks like in the struggle for collective liberation and abolition. We do truly hope that you have enjoyed listening to us, maybe that you've learned something along the way, and we really want to earnestly thank you for coming and joining us for this presentation /recruitment/rally/lecture.